Nearly 300 players have been whittled down to just 4. Welcome, everybody, to the semifinals of the Hearthstone Masters Tour Las Vegas. My name is Frodan. I'm joined by That's Admirable. And together, we're going to bring you guys Galen from the United States of America going up against posesi from Japan. It's an NA versus Apex showdown here. No European players remaining, Admirable. What do you think about that?
I mean, on both sides, we have that showdown as well. And we also have the showdown of the Grandmasters versus the non-Grandmasters that's taking place here, where that's the guaranteed finals that we're going to have. It's going to be a Grandmaster versus non. Now, Galen was on the verge of making the Grandmasters cut. He was a few points shy of being able to do so. And for posesi, this is really the major breakout performance that he's had. Has a strong WSG finish, as well as like some middling performances in playoffs and some pretty decent ones on tours outside of the HCT system. But here, I mean, we're looking at a chance to win a 6-figure prize pool, and that speaks volumes for a player of his caliber.
Yeah, for a lot of these players that live in areas where maybe there's not necessarily as high of standard of living compared to, say, California, anywhere that you go in there, $100,000 is life-changing to them. You know?
$100,000 is life-changing to a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, that might pay off for like half your wedding.
You got to rub it in that way, huh?
That's right. Congratulations ahead of time, by the way.
Thank you.
posesi also, by the way, is a player that's on the top, I believe, top 15 or top 20 all-time earnings list in Asia Pacific for Hearthstone. So this guy has some competitive pedigree, too, if you look even dating back to years for this guy. So he's not a complete nobody, even though people might not have heard of him compared to the left side of the bracket. You're talking about one of the most popular streamers in Hearthstone on Twitch, a dog, and talk about Tom60229, 2017 Hearthstone World Champion. No-brainer that those guys can get through on the left side of the bracket.
Yeah, and kind of talking about the life-changing money thing, you know, there's another funny storyline on that side as well, where if Tom is able to win this event, take first place, he will take the spot as the highest winning Hearthstone player of all time.
And he dethrones Tice, who's currently at #1 of all time after he rode into the sunset in his Aston Martin. But then chose to trade it in for actual money.
Yeah, I would do that trade too. Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty cool. He should have drove. If you ask me, if it was somehow logistically feasible, Tice should have drove that Aston Martin from China to his home in the Netherlands. But I'm pretty sure they wouldn't even let him pass the border in that case.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't take you for one to show off, but, you know, it makes sense to me.
All right. Well, you know, setting the stage here, we have a Mage versus Warrior. Mage has been the story of the tournament. The class has been performing excellently. Can Galen's Warrior hold off against the Mage pressure? We'll find out. I mean, he does have the big game hunters, the Brawl, the Super Clyde, the Slam, but Warriors feel like they have to work a lot, or things have to just fall their way dramatically in order to get the edge in this matchup.
Well, something that I'm noticing of the Warrior deck list is that they're going to have to pull their weight across Mages in this tournament in general. Mage, I think, has probably the most impressive performance of an archetype overall, but taking a look at Galen's deck here, the one thing that concerns me is the lack of Augmented Elic that's in the deck. I think the cut of Augmented Elic for this tournament was quite brilliant. It left you less vulnerable against Warrior to Dinomatic and how big of a swing turn that creates, but against Mage overall, it gives you a little less aggressive potential. So Galen needs cleaner curves, and he needs stronger answers to the right situation. So I think that's what he's got his work cut out for him, is pristine mulligans and making sure he's absolutely preserving his board presence as best as he can. Because if you look at his side deck, he has a lot of counterplay. But if you look at posesi's deck, the story for him is absolutely consistency. And that's why I'm concerned for Galen in this one. There's 2 Twilight Drakes in the secondary deck. There's 2 copies of Sandbinder in the main here. If he's able to contain board pressure, that's where I'm going to find Galen struggling to be able to close the game.
Yeah, it reminds me of you know, Reynad decks back in the day where he just loved 2 of everything. He didn't really want to get too fancy with 1 of techs, in contrast to some of the other players who have like a 1 of Sandbinder, you know, like a 1 of Banana Buffoon, and then they use that tech space to put in other things like the 1 of Frostbolt, or they try to play other really cool fancy tech cards like a Rabble Bouncer. posesi says, I just want to play lean and mean, and I want to make sure that when my draws are consistent, like double Sandbinder, I'm going to be able to hit the most powerful things that my deck can do, which is hitting the Mountain Giants and the Conjurer's Callings, or being able to go for big Mana Cyclone spell generation and have a way to out-resource my opponent or even burn them down. And I think that speaks volumes to like why his deck, maybe he's able to even perform so consistently against the field, because you have to remember, this is not Grandmasters. When we first introduced you guys to Specialist, and on a scale like this, we were playing matches that were predetermined days in advance. You'd know who Hunter Ace was playing against. He was playing against Orange, and so Orange could prepare for Hunter Ace and practice that matchup. In this case, you have to prepare a deck list that's going up against almost 300 players who have also beaten thousands of players online to get to this point. This is one of the biggest Hearthstone tournaments to date, if not the biggest in terms of scope. We've had hundreds of cups, thousands of players, and now we have hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line thanks to the fans at home who bought the Masters bundle for $20, and 50% of it went to that 250 cap extra bonus.
Yeah, and something to really look at with that is the two schools of thought and how posesi is on the consistency side of the school of thought. You want your first deck to drive a game plan because you expect a wide field to be in play. It needs to drive its own plan. The other side of that is having a deck that's strong against what you expect the field to bring. I think that his deck is built wonderfully for this occasion. I think his 11-1 performance is not a fluke. It's a testament to that strategy seeing its payoff this weekend, and he's found himself here. If he wins 3 more matches in a row, he's going to win this whole thing, and it starts with a clean Game 1 build where maybe he doesn't have the best advantage possible versus Gallon, but in Game 2 and Game 3, maybe he's able to make that up. And hey, the winning play for him is just driving that game plan anyway. So to me, that's what I look at as the mark of a truly standout deck this weekend, one that's focused purely on driving its own game plan.
That's right. Best of 3, you don't get that many chances. You better make sure your deck is as consistent as possible. We're going to game number 1 here. Gallon already prioritizing his early Omega Assembly, and he pairs with it a Nightmare Amalgam, which might not look super flashy, but it might be one of the most important things of this matchup, which is Gallon can have a curve now.
Yeah.
And the Nightmare Amalgam doubles as a mech.
It's filling up the role that the augmented Alec left, which is just not having a 3-drop all the time. And so Gallon parsing out the Omega Assembly here and finding that Nightmare Amalgam, that honestly might be one of the most important things that happens for him this game, as crazy and weird as that sounds.
And then look at posesi fighting back for early tempo. Look at how well-versed he is with this deck. He knows immediately what he needs to do. A lot of players, I feel like, would be roping this and just trying to like map out everything, but he can recognize it very quickly.
Yeah, that speaks a lot to the preparation here too, where posesi, when he's confident in a situation, we've seen him act fairly quickly. When he's had more guesswork to do and more variables to consider, it's been a lot different. But you know, this hand pretty much spelled out that direction. And I think that can send a bit of a signal to Gallon, who I do think is one of the more keen players in picking up on little notes like that. But this turn for posesi ends up being super clean because he's working towards that Mountain Giant spot. I'm sorry, the Sea Giant spot as well, where I think Conjurer's Calling here is totally acceptable. I think that expending your removal pretty aggressively here is very acceptable. Heck, I think drawing cards and trying to find a Mountain Giant since you have so many cards in your hand is acceptable. And this, to me, is what makes the Mage deck so hard. You end up throwing a lot of variables thrown in your face very quickly, and you have to make the most of it. It's like you just said, that now is not the time to be second-guessing and experimenting things. You have to be prepared.
Pretty interesting that posesi willingly draws so many cards here for both sides. You would think that Research Project is more of a mid-game option so that you can spend your mana immediately on the cards you draw as opposed to letting your opponent be able to react first. But he chooses to just fill up his hand there. What is he going for, Admirable?
Well, it is kind of interesting. I mean, it tells you exactly where his game plan is, which is I need to pressure Gallon first. And I think that in the overall perspective, this definitely does help posesi more than it helps Gallon, but it's going to be a very high variance that you see with a play like that, where if Gallon's able to find the right tools, it's going to be tough for posesi, I think, to get an aggressive push without the perfect combination of tools. So, you know, I'm looking at Mountain Giant, I'm looking at Conjurer's Calling. If Mountain Giant's picked up, I think Gallon with the extra cards here might be able to solidify enough of a board to take care of something like that.
Right.
And I think it's scary.
It's something that is it's a double-edged sword, right? If you do get the Mountain Giant earlier and a more full hand, congrats, you're able to land it, but you're also giving Warrior more chances to get their removal, and you already know that he has at least one Militia Commander and a Ziliax, or 2 Militia Commanders. Those are strong response tools to help pick apart, you know, that Mountain Giant or that Twilight Drake that you might be drawing for going to turn 4.
And so that kind of takes me to the bridge point, which is how does he take advantage of Sea Giant? How does he take advantage of stuff like Fireball, which is created and not necessarily super strong? How does he fend off pressure, and how does he redevelop after that point? I think removal is probably just his best plan right now because he doesn't have the big swing turns. But you know, I look at a spot like this and I wonder, is Mana Cyclone a big focus of posesi to try to get more tools and fend off Gallon's assault, or is it about driving your own game plan? And honestly, it could just be that posesi lacks any of those situations and goes, I gotta figure it out.
Gallon utilizing the Ziliax and preemptively placing on board. He's bracing himself for a potential Conjurer's Calling.
That's a big draw.
Sorcerer's Apprentice with the second Mana Cyclone.
So the question here is, when do you use a Sorcerer's Apprentice? The Sorcerer's Apprentice is a big draw because for what it means in future turns. I don't necessarily think posesi has to go for it in this spot.
The future is
I think he's going to, He doesn't have to. So I'm curious about this situation right here. Without an invocation, the situation's not going to work.
Okay.
That's a nice one. Dynomatics are getting awfully scary, though. Unless you got a bunch of Ray of Frosts.
Yeah. I mean, this
That's
first
a
one will
major
draw
one.
a card.
If he draws Elemental Invocation here, we're looking at another full hand and probably board advantage. Oh, my.
Says he does hesitate. Something he does want to be mindful of is whether or not he's wasting these cards, but I think Mirror Image is just really good.
Now the Dynomatics are looking actually pretty darn awful. So that is a major concern for Gallon at that point. I would say his best draw has to be Warpath.
Yes. It's most certainly Warpath because he's not getting through without it. Unless he is able to control the outcome of his Dynomatic. And even then, he wouldn't be able to clear off everything. Blastmaster Boom getting drawn here for Gallon.
No bombs in the deck.
A Mega Assembly to start things off here for Gallon.
So now for Gallon, it's probably going to be a transition of game plan where you move into a slower position and you try to take advantage of being able to simply eliminate all of Posesi's stuff. It's tough for Posesi to have explosive turns while he's got so many minions out. So Gallon does have time, I think, to get to that point. There's only one copy of Brawl, but there are 2 copies of Warpath in the deck. And you're looking at Blastmaster Boom already in hand. So I think he's got some tools to fight with here, but given the landscape change, it's probably advantage Posesi right now.
It does seem that Posesi has all the resources that he'll need to close out the game. I think for Gallon, he's also contemplating, like, how does his hand adapt to the fact that he has Blastmaster Boom? Okay, he does end up killing one of these mirror images.
Yeah.
Sea Giant is still basically free.
Yeah, this is Sea Giant Conjurer's turn for sure. What else do you do, though? That's the part that's hard, is I don't know what the rest of the turn looks like.
Yeah, does he only commit one Conjurer's Calling to this situation? Because, I mean, he can hold on to the other one in case he draws a Mountain Giant.
I think it's likely that he ends up trading some board space here. So
right. He does have the opportunity to trade Luna and go for another Conjurer's Calling. Deathwing is one of the ideal ones, and this is still a significant amount of pressure already.
This is a lot.
And your opponent is most likely tempted to brawl this situation.
Yeah, however, Gallon, that's the card that Gallon's missing. And so we're talking about turns 7, 8, 9. Gallon has to survive 3 turns to bridge to a potential for Omega Devastator here.
And he's ready to use both of his Omega Assemblies.
And Warpath is too late, I think.
It's... Let's see. If you use Warpath 3 times, you can clear off... it doesn't change anything from using it 2 times, so you might as well use Acolyte Pain and draw 2 cards.
And so given the Sea Giant, Gallon has to deviate away from the Dr. Boom plan, and he has to move towards digging for exactly Brawl, and I think that this Acolyte Warpath tells Posesi exactly that.
Yeah, he's going to have to gain as much life as possible, too, by trading against the Sea Giant.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And with a wealth of Ray of Frost and an Archmage Antonitis, I think Posesi is pretty well shaped up to close this first game.
Yes, definitely Deathwing goes phase here.
This is a big ouchies.
You hang around TJ's baby a little too much, huh?
I'm just looking at 12 attack. Ouchies. 12, Dan, 12. There's only 16 left.
Well, he's going to Conjurer's Calling, maybe some 2 more.
Oh.
Well, I mean...
That's so good. It's a 10-10.
Well, he gave,
10 is almost 12.
I mean, he went from 12 to 14 power. I think that's not really what Posesi truly wanted.
The thing about it is you split it with just extra health. Like, Gallon's never killing this.
Right.
He has to draw Brawl or the game ends.
Kind of wonder if, in a very weird way, having Mechathune out makes it easier for Gallon to target things with the Dynomatic, but I think 12 health is just too much to overcome.
I think Posesi is considering, you know, either hand dumping here or just also the trade on the Luna. I think the Luna trade has some merit due to Brawl, but you're also drawing an extra card for Gallon at that point. So the trade-off would be you know, have lethal pressure that lives more often in the face of Brawl, but at the same time you're also drawing Gallon deeper to Brawl in that situation. So I think Gallon's just probably done here. He has the Rush of the Eternium Rover, so he's going to stay alive for a turn. but can you imagine bridging turn 9 in this situation as well?
No, he already used Ziliax too, by the way. Remember he played it on 5 for tempo?
Yeah. I mean, he needs picture perfect next turn.
0 mana spell at the beginning of this turn.
And I think Posesi has a lot of ways to actually even mitigate that further. You know, the first thing I looked at was, could you banana pressure out? The answer to that is no. Just Gallon has too much life total. So how do you set up the cleanest way to close the game next turn? It's probably an Archmage Antonidas.
Yep, I'm inclined to agree. I mean, Posesi does have the opportunity to try to fish for lethal now with the Mana Cyclone.
You can also shred a draw away from Gallon that way. Polymorph.
Yeah. It's the most expensive spell and you get it for free.
Don't tell me there's not a way to make players discard cards. Draw suppression.
Yeah, this is one that was generated too.
Lotheb for draw. That's what I want.
It's going for the Archmage.
Time runs out on me.
Pretty surprised about that. It makes a lot of sense because his main operation here is just to ensure 2 fireballs and at the same time make Brawl tougher.
Right. I don't mind it. Set your opponent down to 11, which means you have 13 damage through the fireballs and the hero power.
Gallon's done. Game 1 over to Posesi, who just, as soon as the Sea Giant came down, was able to just pretty much end the game. And that's really the kind of trouble that Gallon can find himself in, which is why he's included so much in a secondary deck to pinpoint this exact problem. I think if he's able to eliminate threats like 1 by 1, because the way that the Warrior interpretation has been changed from a control deck to a mid-range pressure deck, oftentimes the tempo you get when your opponent is forced to play a Giant is irrecoverable. From Posesi's perspective, but at the same time, you have recovery options versus those kinds of turns where you just don't die immediately because your opponent gets to smack you with a Deathwing.
Yeah, that said, it's still a very difficult matchup. If the Mage continues to play well, I'm looking at cards like Twilight Drake to be the big MVP of the coming games in case he can't land the Giants down cleanly because as a 4/9, as a 4/8, it's very difficult for the Warrior to deal with just with one card. They'll have to piece together other things.
Yeah.
And if you're not able to deal with it, let's say you even are able to present a reasonable amount of threat, that's also a card that's worthy of a candidate to be Conjurer calling, and then or Conjuring called, and then be able to build up pressure through a slew of 4-mana minions.
Yeah. So Gallon has moved over to the tertiary deck where you see 2 big game hunters, a Brawl, and a Super Collider come in. Another Slam comes in as well. That's kind of a curious option. Probably just needed a flexible way to deal damage that doesn't take up too much of your mana. And then you take a look at what's removed. Harrison Jones, awful. Archivist Lysiana, awful. Omega Assembly, you saw how it was used. And Eternium Rovers. I wouldn't call them useless in the matchup, but certainly not crucial to the matchup, where the other cards certainly can be. And so looking over at Posesi's deck, to counteract this exact style of thing, you just added heavier stuff. 2 Astromancers is usually more than enough to bring a big punch in this one. The Sea Giant's moving out. I mean, you saw what an impact Sea Giant had, but that's something that Gallon's looking to actively control in future scenarios. And when you expect Big Game Hunter to come in, what that means is you expect less overall pressure from the Eternium Rovers being taken out. So Sea Giant a little bit weaker in those styles of instances. So just well thought out here for Posesi.
Well, we got information that Posesi's actually not switching to a secondary. He's staying on his primary deck. He's not going to put the Twilight Drakes in. He's not putting the Astromancers in. He's not putting Harrison in. He wants good old-fashioned Sea Giants. Whoa. He's willing to take on the big game hunters and super colliders.
That's kind of weird to me because he loses out on 2 Twilight Drakes, a Harrison Jones, and 2 Astromancers in that
That's
position.
just fantastic cards against Warriors.
I actually wonder if that's a nod to the way that Gallon plays the game, and perhaps the tech choice specifically of Spellbreaker, where Spellbreaker can blow out a Twilight Drake sometimes. And at the same time, if you expect Gallon to play very aggressively and go wide, it means Sea Giant does have an easier payoff potential. So I'm curious if that's part of the thought here for Posesi on not going to the secondary deck. That's very interesting to me.
Yep.
It's a bold call.
Indeed. It's a bold call, given that you are bringing that deck list generally to beat the Warriors, but maybe against Gallon, like you said, it's his deck list, maybe it's his playstyle. Something is discouraging him from choosing his secondary deck with all those tech cards.
I'm actually just curious if it could have been the overall performance throughout the tournament. Like maybe as things progressed and they kept going, you know, posesi just kind of realized, you know, I'm just not performing as well with this deck.
Right. Maybe like he's stuck holding Astromancers, and he's like the game has snowballed out of control before Astromancers are relevant.
The other thing too is Gallon doesn't know that. posesi does not have to give that information to Gallon of which of his 3 decks he's using. You know, a secondary and tertiary deck are going to be up to 5 cards different going into games 2 and 3. But the only way Gallon gets that information is if he sees something that changes that. The only thing right now he could see that changes that is basically top-end presence.
Yeah, the Celiacs and Sea Giants would be the big dead giveaways. I mean, the secondary deck also loses Frost Nova, it looks like, which probably is something that he's thinking about too.
It's interesting. And Gallon draws Super Collider. The first big test is going to be on the horizon with Mountain Giant, but the timing of that, I think, is very relevant for Gallon in this instance as well. And posesi's shaking his head when he saw Gallon reach for coin.
Yeah, I mean, almost any 5-mana play here is very hard to deal with.
5-mana plays are going to be, like, I mean, Brawl and Big Game Hunter aren't happening, so you're looking at Dynomatic, Super Collider, and Ziliax. Like, I don't know why that would be such a big issue.
Well, you just be behind on board.
I mean, I get why Ziliax would be a big issue. I mean, that was, you know, that's pretty clear, but I wonder if Gallon's maybe just interested in pushing face. Maybe Gallon's trying to send a different signal. Maybe he never intends to do that, but I would guess if he's reaching for this coin, he really wants the Ziliax.
Unity, precision, deflection.
And I imagine this is going straight upstairs. Whoa!
I mean, the Sandbinder is a potential target for Conjurer's Coin like we're talking about, so in case he gets desperate for that.
Are you weak to that? I mean, you have a Super Collider.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, 4-drops have generally lowered themselves a lot in power. They usually range from 2 to 3 attack now. It's actually not as often as you get like a 4-mana 4/5.
And so, again, something to consider is that I think Gallon anticipates the Harrison Jones coming in. And so this Super Collider is not often a proactive set for Gallon. And in fact, unless he has just an immaculate read of how posesi's going to do this, this Super Collider's never coming down. So if he plays the Super Collider, what that means is he believes he's stuck on to a deck that does not have Harrison Jones, which is only the primary. So Dynomatic and then pressure back it is.
Yeah, Gallon's also ready for the Mountain Giant Conjurer's Calling, which is coming out on 6.
Yeah. You don't want to like proactively set it up when you could bait that exact play.
Right. And no matter what ends up happening, Super Collider should be able to deal with it. This is the ideal scenario for Gallon, so that way he doesn't have to give up an extra minion. Have then been double Grave Horror, it would have been bad. You can see posesi.
Not such a super guy anymore.
Yeah. Feeling a little under the gun here. He's at 12 life. He's taking way too much damage. Just feels like the old handlock days.
And so that would be the exact reason why Gallon cleared off the Sandbinder in that instance, is the potential for a Grave Harbor to be in the middle and run into the Sandbinder instead of run into the Giant on the Super Collider attack. So his trade was a preemptive setup for exactly Super Collider being a big payoff guaranteed.
Okay, I think the positioning still might allow him to do if he just attacks it. But if the Grave Horror was in the middle, and the Giant was
so
in the far
if the
end.
Grave Horror hits the middle position, Sandbinder's on one side or the other, and then a Mountain Giant is flanking on that side, it doesn't guarantee the hit. So
pretty clever.
It's a proactive play around of that nightmare situation.
So he saw 2 turns in advance based off what posesi was trying to do, because posesi wasn't playing any cards.
And like random positioning in advance as well. Like just very well thought out from Gallon. And I think it's one of his major strengths, is being able to understand those positions.
I mean, he even admits that sometimes it's his own like weakness, that he's like overthinking stuff, and then as a result, just like, well, I should have just played the normal. I would have won. But he is very next level. The more you get to play with Gallon and hear his thoughts, he does tend to think around all the corner case scenarios.
Yeah, and so for posesi, you know, the game plan has very rapidly shifted into making sure that I can get control of the board and then land Archmage Antonidas in a valuable spot. And with Gallon's hand right now, I am a bit worried that posesi is not going to be able to do that, but there's still strong tools here. And so Flame Strike is something that I really have my eye on how he's going to win this game.
Well, if he Flame Strikes...
Whoa! Oh, no.
No, I mean, look, he shuffled 2 bombs in, and Blastmaster Boom is available, so there's 2 bombs And posesi doesn't have that much time, and he's probably going to be playing cards that draw deeper into his deck anyways. I don't know if I mind it.
I don't mind it. I'm just looking at a Ziliax. I don't want to say that I'm biased this one, but Gallon has been a good friend of mine for many years. So I at least like to see him take it to a Game 3, and I feel like swinging with a Super Collider here might be one of the ways that posesi actually gets out of the game.
In what way?
You're able to recover through like Ziliax, and you draw another Mountain Giant. You know, he still has a second swing of it available, but sometimes you use him to clear out taunts, or you use him to clear out just a couple minions in play at the same time. It's a clever swing because it pressures posesi. It forces these kinds of interactions to be present.
Oh my goodness. This ends up lining up perfectly for Super Collider. And now Gallon has a freedom of playing just Blastmaster Boom, uncontested.
So the question is purely, is the Town Crier ever a liability to Sea Giant turns? That's it. That's the only question for Gallon, and
not really.
Not thinking about it.
Because he has the Brawl, so Sea Giant, Frost Nova, these kinds of things come in, and then Gallon might have a chance of just killing posesi with the very next turn.
Behold the
Oh, my.
Oh no, I think that might have done it here, Admirable, because if Sea Giant Frost Nova comes down, Gallon brawls, there's a very high chance that the Boombots just kill posesi the next turn. And on top of that, Gallon would have gotten confirmation that he's not on his secondary deck. So this is information being given to posesi going to game number 3 if it ends up becoming the case.
And that's important information. Now, Mirror Image, I do think posesi should be risking the push right here. You're going to have enough gas down that the Boombots can absorb this. So the pop-off here, I think he needs to... I think he really needs to try to clear off Boombots and hope that they hit these minions.
Yes, he needs
Leroy picked up.
Needs to Arcane Missiles right now.
Oh my. And so now Gallon is very close to closing this game with a Brawl. Like, the Boombots average 2.5 damage each, and one minion on one side's going to live. Why wouldn't you go for it?
Yeah, assuming that posesi even wins the Brawl.
Gallon had an opportunity to also look at this, and if he doesn't close the Boombots, if he has the Soul Minion, he can silence an attack. Prentice goes down. Game.
Tied series going to game number 3 as Gallon is the underdog, and he's also trying to make his claim for the America's Grandmasters season next year. Because remember, the highest performer from all the Masters Tour per region will get a spot in Grandmasters guaranteed. And currently he is uncontested in Americas because Dog is the second highest player right now in the tournament. But Dog's already a Grandmaster.
Yeah.
Same thing with posesi. These are really important matches on both sides, not only for the money and the glory and the prestige, but also for their future as a Hearthstone professional.
And something to look at from that game is the contrast of game number 1 and game number 2, where Gallon was able to be aggressive and posesi couldn't capitalize on that aggression in the right manner. A large part of that is because of Blastmaster Boom versus Dr. Boom. There's much more interested in having Blastmaster Boom is Gallon in this instance because of the pressure it creates. If you give Mage enough time, they can do some absolute crazy bananas, bonkers stuff that happens in that situation. So for Gallon, I think that Game 3 needs to be a repeat of a situation like that. Blastmaster Boom, probably the most paramount card in the deck.
Well, we'll see. posesi has decided to go for his secondary deck for game number 3. This is a really interesting mind game because perhaps maybe Gallon will start thinking that posesi stays on the primary for game 3.
Well, that's what we saw in game 2, so why would he go to the secondary? It would be my thought in Gallon's position. And so
that's posesi using information potentially against his opponent that he willingly conceded in game number 2.
Yes, and so for Gallon, you take a look at potentially proactively setting a Super Collider by thinking that posesi's actually sticking on the primary deck. I think that is something to consider, but when I think posesi felt the impact of that Super Collider, you start to realize, you know what? I really needed this Harrison Jones, and I really need Twilight Drakes to fight for early board. Yeah. So he is susceptible to Spellbreaker tempo turns, and he's going to be still susceptible to having a Harrison Jones in the face of Gallon perhaps not having a weapon. His hand might get a little bit clunkier with a pair of Astromancers, but I think that's the strongest plan. You want to fight Gallon in the early game, and you want to get to the mid and late stages by just plopping threats and putting Gallon to the test.
posesi on the coin, that's already a big deal. Has Conjurer's Calling in hand already with the opportunity to have a lot more upside if he gets that Mountain Giant.
Yeah, that's a really tough hand for Gallon because he has to balance keeping tech choices versus aggression and overall game plan. all three of these cards are keepable in some degree, but each one of them means a different variable. And so what that tells me is that you want to keep the most powerful payoff, which is the Super Collider, and then try to find some aggression from there.
3 games in this series, 3 Tower Criers on 1 from Gallon.
I'll tell you what, he would
Massive
trade
implication.
He would trade all 3 of those to have coin in all 3 of the games instead.
Well, sure, but I mean, you get this is we'll take this as a nice consolation prize.
I definitely agree. I mean, Town Crier is the most important 1-cost card in the deck.
Yep.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
I mean, he's cutting Attorney Remover. He only had 2 1-drops in the deck. He's getting them every game.
1-drop Gallon, they call him.
Calling him that for years.
3-drop here, Paramount, and it misses.
Nothing.
But if you're not going to draw a 3-drop, Wrench Caliber's probably the best one to draw. The issue that Gallon's going to run into is that Posesi's hand is pretty stacked to the brim. I mean, we're looking at, I think Posesi is going to forego the Twilight Drake next turn in favor of Arcane Intellect, but his threats are abundant this game. Like, he is not running out of gas. So Gallon, he doesn't know it just yet. He's probably anticipating it, needs to find a pressure plan.
Well, Wrench Caliber seems to be it. He can set it.
And forget it. Just like that thing.
What thing?
I don't remember.
Twilight Drake's a 4/10. This is so difficult to take down.
Only susceptible to Spellbreaker in this spot.
Whew.
Yeah, Dynomatic probably the issuance here, but that's 1 damage off of killing the Twilight Drake, so that's kind of a disaster.
Yeah, and it lines up really nicely with the Dynomatic health too, because if it's a 4/1, it just trades into the Dynomatic.
Yeah, so Gallon has to find out what's going to be best in this instance overall, and Dynomatic, when it doesn't have its initial target immediately, it tends to get a bit worse. And so for Gallon, he is just going in on killing this thing. He says, I cannot let this live.
Yep. And so this is a reactive game plan, which is not what he wants.
That first attack on the Wrench Caliber, I think, is going to come back to haunt Gallon in this spot, because if he still had that attack, I mean, this would be dead to the Dynomatic.
No, but he's got this Conjurer's Calling on the Mountain Giant.
And that's the reason he kept Super Collider. There's 2 big game hunters, so Posesi's going to play around Big Game Hunter. He's not going to play around Super Collider. Super Collider gets the payoff, but Posesi answers back with Harrison Jones. This game's getting nuts.
Yeah, and I think that it does end up giving Posesi the edge here, because he has so many more resources to back this up.
Well, Gallon gets to answer this back right away with Dynomatic. So Gallon, I think, is on the onus to pick up a key draw, but it's countered now.
Is it Dynomatic? He can still Warpath Dynomatic. That is available to him.
Okay, Gallon takes a step back. He has to visualize how do you win this game.
Because that went 0-60 real quick.
Yes.
And now it's like, okay, I don't want to get suckered into just playing the first impulse that I have, because a lot of these players are good enough to recognize a good play within the first 3 seconds, but they have to evaluate it and, of course, think, am I overreacting to my first initial impulse?
Look deeper.
Because he does have other plays besides clearing the board here. He could load up some board tension. He has 2 Snip Snaps available to him. He could just maybe set bombs and play Militia Commander to try to win back the board. But it's all about whether or not he feels like he can part ways with these resources, because he is going to lose on the resource war based off a very cursory glance of both these players' hands right now.
I want to contrast this with game number 2, where honestly Posesi might have, his choice on deck might have given this away. Imagine if he had a Harrison Jones on that first Super Collider. Like, how different is game number 2?
Well, I mean, Posesi would have the board. He would have a board to fight back.
It's crazy how powerful Harrison Jones is against Super Collider specifically. And Gallon, he's saying that board tension is the way that he's going to win this game, so he has to build up and go from there.
Yeah. Snip Stab as 2 separate entities. Bomb being drawn here. I mean, without Gallon having Blastmaster Boom, I think he'll take any damage he can get.
Yeah,
but
I don't necessarily think that's a negative right now, where I think it typically is, where, you know, Gallon has multiple avenues to victory. One of them is a bunch of bomb draws for Posesi. The other one is going to be Blastmaster Boom. So, you know, basically just whichever win condition showing up is the one you want to come to fruition. But, you know, I fear Gallon is just going to be getting way out pressure in this situation. But that's why Snip Snap's good, is it helps keep that chip damage high. And I think Posesi needs to respect that.
it's tough. It's tough in this position because you know that there are some punishes available with all these mechs on the board.
I wonder.
What is the true punish? Is it a Dynamatic?
Probably a double Warpath turn.
Okay.
Whoa.
Well,
Oh, Wrench Caliber. Wrench Caliber. So bomb. I mean, the bomb plan is, I think, in the way that Galen's going to have to go in this direction. He has Warpath, he has Brawl, he has Shield Slam, he has Dynomatic, and he has 3 more bombs to shuffle in. I think Galen can defend himself long enough to sometimes see this plan happen.
so you think you go all-out aggression?
Do you have another call? The problem with the all-out aggression plan is if Posesi counterattacks with an Archmage turn,
Yeah.
that's going to hurt.
I feel like I do agree with your assessment where, like, I don't think you can get many turns where your minions get to attack the face. Your opponent has so many cards, and they've been very conservative with their use of it. Like, for example, this is the second Conjurer's Calling from the same one. Posesi just has all these cards that he could be using to grab the board. So if you're assuming that your opponent has more opportunities to swing it, you might want to get the chip in damage while you can. He's brawling here.
I am going to have to piece together what I think this is, and it's going to take me a minute probably.
Mirror Image survives. He has Clockwork Goblin to play afterwards. Remember, Posesi does not have Sea Giants in his deck. He switched the secondary. Galen should know this because he saw Harrison Jones. There's only one deck with Harrison Jones, and that's a secondary deck with no Frost Novas, no Sea Giant, no Zilliax.
This is an odd play to me, where I think Galen is trying to turn back on the tempo of Dynomatic and try to get in a few more points of chip damage.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that he wants to Dynamatic Militia Commander and then maybe utilize Wrench Caliber as his finisher.
Posesi has a lot of counterplay available here as well, and just big turns at that, and Evocation picked up off Magic Trick, and that spells the turn out.
Oh, goodness
That's
gracious.
far right side.
Yes, but the nice thing is that if this does take all of his turn, Galen does have an answer with the Warpath.
The future.
But, I mean, this is just intense amounts of value. Like, I can't even handle it right now. Oh, my goodness.
Creation.
He has the ability to play a Sorcerer's Apprentice with all this, too.
So, yeah, so I actually think you need to value cards from your deck, but he's running low on time. I mean, he took a long time to get this situation because it's tough. It's a tough spot. You got to get moving. I mean, you got like 15 seconds left, and you got a Stargazer Loot on board.
He's only going to play the Mana Cycle for 2 cards. Doesn't want to overfill his hand unnecessarily. And a ping.
And you see Posesi take shake of the head at the end there. That turn could have been so much more if he was able to decisively navigate that.
I feel like this is kind of what Galen wants. Now he can Warpath twice, Dynamatic, and push face. And he puts his boat down to 15, which is actually an important break point.
What now?
It's a major turn. Wait. Okay, never mind. I was going to say, could he bump with the 1/1 attack and then just Dynomatic? But that would leave still just barely outside the health threshold.
Yeah.
But Galen's looking at 3 more damage, 6 presented, and I think Posesi still has an opportunity to climb back here. These are quality cards.
Oh my goodness, he's drawing the bombs!
It's getting close, though. It's Antonidas time.
Right.
But that's right into Omega Devastator.
Yep. Did he wait too long? Did he wait too long to have it? His hand is so good.
I'm telling you, that last turn is my big question mark. Posesi could have done so much more.
Right.
And I don't know what the more yields, and I don't know what the more is. That's one of the most complicated Hearthstone turns that I've seen all tournament. And not only that, it's the highest pressure game that Posesi's played all tournament.
Right. Winner of
and
this.
now we're going away from Tony. This gives Galen more time.
I think he just wants to play maximum amount of pressure.
I don't know what the play here is. My instinct tells me you need to Archmage Antonidas so that you can have a path to close the game before Galen can chip you away.
Time runs out on me.
He's trying to play a Sandbinder and a Scorch, squeeze everything in tempo-wise, and the ping. So he maps out his mana usage very nicely.
I think this was the wiser of the two if you're going to kill out both minions, because this already prompts the Omega Devastator, and then you get to land the Antonidas.
But there's 6 damage coming through Wrench Caliber,
And
Yeah.
Posesi already drew so many cards. Remember how many cards he was drawing with Stargazer Luna?
It's not only that, but also with Gallon halfway through the deck, Posesi's going to rely on freezes to contain this Omega Devastator, and what that means is if Gallon draws his Spellbreaker, he gets a surprise push of damage.
Yeah, you're right.
So that's another kicker that Posesi has to account for.
I mean, if I'm Posesi, I'm killing this Omega Devastator. Last I checked, there's 4 Rays of Frost available to him. Oh, but he's not. Is he?
Yeah, he kills it here.
Okay, okay. He should.
Oh, no.
Oh, he's thinking. The Spellbreaker. He knows. He knows that the Spellbreaker's a possibility here.
This
Does he
is...
take that gamble? He does! And Gallon's on a draw to win. Big Game Hunter off the top. Shield block. That's a Blastmaster Boom!
So Blastmaster Boom, there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on the other side. 18 can come into Fireballs, so there's 28 damage loaded up for Posesi right now. That's just outside of the range of what Posesi's damage is.
But there is the possibility of a randomly generated spell that he's not accounting for, like in the power.
It'd have to be a Frostbolt in that instance. So Gallon does want to Frostbolt in this spot to chip the damage away. This stops the Fireball pressure. He knows what his life total's at. He has Blastmaster Boom. He has Posesi on a bomb draw to lose the game. Posesi is in major trouble in this spot. He has to fade 2 bombs in the deck for the rest of the game. 20% of the time he draws a card, he dies.
Power creation. We need something massive here from Posesi to either stop the damage or even just gain life. But there's not many options at 6 mana. What can he get?
Not gonna Khadgar? Not gonna Khadgar?
Yes, I think you Khadgar here for sure.
Well, I don't know. I don't know, because if you miss, you die.
What to do? What to do?
You can very easily die if you miss. That's enough to stop it. Is it enough to counter pressure in time?
I think you're in such a bad spot. You want to go for it.
Omega Devastator! Another bomb could go in!
Is it better to do that with Blastmaster Boom? I think you have 2 bombs set. Boom bots can still do a lot of work, and it puts pressure on your opponent to clear the board as opposed to just playing a 3-3. And I think Gallon agrees. There's 3 bombs in the deck at least. Posesi.
30% chance to die.
Oh, he fades it. 10 damage plus 13 is 23. No Frost Novas in the deck. He has to load up. Does he want to Ray of Frost first, or does he want to play Astromancer with the Khadgar?
I think he's thinking exactly about outs from Mana Cyclone. He wants the Frost Nova.
He wants the Frost Nova. Only 1 spell. Gets a mirror image. That helps.
It could just absorb.
Yes, it helps, but it doesn't cure the problem right now.
Gallon has 1 more Brawl left in the deck. A Brawl here would be a repeat of what we saw in the previous game. Posesi, 1/3 of his draws will kill him. But if you look at Gallon's health total, and you look at the board, I don't think Gallon has the time to change any of that aspect other than just hoping Boobot's hit, but he draws the Brawl!
That is such a likely outcome. Gallon raises the arm.
Posesi, he's just taken off the headset. He believes that he's done. And he's done. Gallon defeats Posesi by a score of 2-1. A narrow endgame position where Posesi cannot find counter pressure and take it out. And Gallon moves on to the top 4 at the first Masters Tour ever.
He's
in
in
Las
the
Vegas.
grand final.
I'm sorry, the grand finals. Oh my gosh! I am crazy. That game had me thrown in so many different directions because both players had opportunities to take missteps and present plans that did not pressure enough. Both times that they did it, there were specific things that they were playing around. And so when you look at the position from top down, Gallon's initial aggressive brawl was to reset and then rebuild to another position. And ultimately, that won Gallon the game.
Yeah, that was the move. That was the play of the game right there. The early brawl that we were confused about because it looked like it was a good response tool. Once again, recognizing that he is the underdog in this matchup. And with the tools in his hand, he could leverage a board and push damage wherever he needed to and not have to depend on a bomb out to win the game, because I think if he didn't go for that brawl, the pressure may have mounted up to the point where he needed to play that Clockwork Goblin and hope that he draws 2 bombs in a row, And how many times have we seen that fail? I feel like we've seen that fail like 9.5 out of 10 times.
That's probably about the percent chance for it to fail, if not more than that, in that situation. And so when you look at that early brawl, you have to realize that that's the kind of plays you make as a Warrior player that show that extreme expertise. Brawl is not necessarily a tool just for defense. It is sometimes a play to generate offense as well. It realizes the potential of your win rate so much earlier in situations like that. You know, some of the great Warrior players I think about, like Yarla, a European Grandmaster, he is so good at staying alive and using Brawl to change the landscape of a game. That's exactly what Gallon did in that one. Sees a payoff due to the future potential. The chip damage just added up and ended up getting Gallon to that position.
Yep. The story of posesi stops here, but I'm sure we'll see more of him in the future, as Japan should be extremely proud of his performance.
Absolutely.
But the story belongs to another contender from the Americas. Gallon advances to the finals. He will be playing a Grandmaster in the finale. Who is it going to be between Tom, 60229 from Taiwan, or is it going to be Dog from the USA? The final three has been set here in the Masters Tour in Las Vegas. When we come back, the second semifinal. Don't go anywhere.